Good afternoon, and thanks everyone for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson, and man, it is a rapid fire of updates on this Monday. You had a feeling that things would start to maybe move quickly in terms of Arkansas players maybe going portal, maybe draft information, because Arkansas season ended Thursday. So you got home, travel back. Your season's over. You get back. I know the staff was meeting on Saturday. I know that for a fact, Arkansas Razorbacks coaching staff. And now you've jumped into the first part of the week, and it's been kind of a flurry of news today, some related to Arkansas's current roster, some related to the highest ranked remaining high school prospect in the 2025 class, which is a loaded class, right on the heels of McDonald's All-American game. Some news there. Big Z to the portal today. So we got Nate Ament we're going to talk about first, Big Z. But we're going to talk about some other things. We got more information on guys like Keyshawn Hall, another big wing that's gonna zoom with Arkansas as well as Keyshawn Hall. Both of those are scheduled for Tuesday, and then we're going to start talking about some of the bigs in the portal, and kind of look at that front line, because the fact that Big Z's in the portal informs us of several things. It amplifies Calipari's retention plans, right? We've been talking for a while. There have been 5 major names. Well, Adu Thero may be sliding back into the picture of a guy you want to retain, and now we know in the portal. So basically, you could argue there's still 5 guys you're fighting to retain, just maybe a little bit different than you thought it would be just weeks ago. But we're going to start with Nate Ament. Once again, thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. The 5-star took part. He's taking part of the McDonald's All-American events through the weekend, and then tomorrow, Tuesday, the payoff is the McDonald's All-American game tomorrow night. That'll be on ESPN, I think, at 8 Central Time. But the target date for his commitment announcement was April 1st. Now, I had a phone call, I don't know, about an hour or so ago from somebody that was watching, I guess, a local podcast or something, saying, hey, they were saying there was some chatter about, and I can't confirm this, I didn't see it. So I don't know if it was framed exactly right. But some talk about, well, the Nate Ament target date of April 1st was never a real thing. That was never anything that was verified. Well, that's baloney. I interviewed Nate Ament on the Friday night before the main part of his Arkansas visit. That was March 7th, getting close to midnight. And what I always do with recruits, when he came to Fayetteville, again, remember that weekend, Mississippi State game, he was there. Darius Acuff came in. But when I interviewed Nate Ament, what I always do with prospects is I cover what I'm going to ask in the interview prior to putting on recording it and then asking the actual questions. So I kind of cover it twice. I don't want them surprised. And one of the things I asked him was, before we went on, is this going to be your last visit? Because you've still got several weeks before that April 1st target date, which, if that's true, and he nodded and said, yeah, that's accurate, and I'm not taking any more visits. Well, and then he conveyed that in my video interview. So that was always a real date. That wasn't a made-up date. And here's why that's important. Here's why that's important, is because if there was no fixed date, and now we learned today that he's pushing that out and not going to make a decision tomorrow. And the reason that is important is if that was never a fixed date, well, no big deal, right? The fact that it was tells you that he's not fully ready to make a decision yet. He had a target date set. That was real. It always was real. And he's not ready just yet. And that announcement got made today. Okay, so here's why, adding to that, it's important. What else have we been talking about? The last few times we've talked about 5-star Nate Ament, the source information, one source I had says Arkansas, he didn't think was no longer, he said Arkansas didn't see them in the picture anymore. He thought it would be Duke, but it wasn't firm that it was Duke. The same source, which I told you, and I'll repeat it now so that we cover ground again, was that he wasn't sure if Arkansas wasn't in it because they were unwilling to go up in NIL. And he wasn't sure for sure that it would be Duke. I've had other sources think it's Louisville. We've said that. But one of the things I said was, because of that uncertainty on a couple of points, I wasn't convinced that Arkansas was out on Nate Ament. Now, one of the last times I was on and spoke a little bit more about Nate Ament, I said that one thing I was able to confirm is that Arkansas, and I used the Will Wade quote from back when he was at LSU, a strong ass offer. I don't know if you remember that reference, but I used that And I said, I heard Arkansas's NIL offer is really strong. So it's not about backing down from that. I didn't mention that. And so I said that that was the kind of thing that you keep your eye on this. All right. Well, today, ESPNU, I guess it was a replay of something that was probably live streamed. I didn't see it on the cable availability prior to today, but around 12:30, the boys McDonald's All-American game scrimmage, they always do this. They have a scrimmage and it gets televised. This was a repeat or a delayed showing of it. And they cut it up. It was fragmented. They didn't show every minute of the game. But Paul Biancardi, everybody knows who that is, the director of ESPN's recruiting, said during that game that for as far as he was concerned, the Nate Ament recruitment was down to Arkansas and Duke. That's what Biancardi said. Now, we know his Final Five also includes, again, Louisville, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Arkansas was the last visit. Darius Acuff was there. Darius Acuff and Malik Thomas also participating in the McDonald's All-American game. I tweeted some highlights out on my Twitter account from the scrimmage today. Put out some highlights from some of the practice stuff they did over the weekend. Acuff has been really, really good over there. And Malik Thomas had, in some of the scrimmage, practice stuff, some of the clips I put out that I saw from over the weekend were also really good. But the point is, Ament is pushing out his decision, and Cardi thinks it's down to Arkansas and Duke. And I think this is good for Arkansas, the fact that he's not ready to make an announcement. I think that's probably a good thing. I don't know why I think that exactly, other than I know the offer is really strong. It was stronger than I thought it would be on NIL coming from, and I haven't mentioned what it is, and I'm going to sit tight on that. But one of the other things we talked about over and over again, talking about Duke, was Jay Lucas leaving that staff and taking over at Miami. And the Boozer twins, who played at Columbus High School in Miami, maybe Ament was going to, part of this delay was to see, pushing it out to April 1st to begin with, was to see what happened there. Well, we don't know anything about the Boozer twins other than they're still headed to Duke, which lines up with the source who thought Arkansas maybe was out of it. He said they were out of it, but he wasn't 100% firm on Duke. Well, that's because probably Ament is still looking at that situation. It could be that Duke is the leader and Arkansas is right there, and he's just waiting to see what the Boozer twins do if they stay put, and that kind of a situation. Or it very well could be that Arkansas continues to step up with it when it comes to NIL, and they're making this decision tougher for him. Hell, I guess it could end up being that he does something else, and it's not Duke or Arkansas or Louisville. I think I mentioned on one of these, and another source jumped in there and said, Tennessee's trying to make a hard push here. There are some that think Kentucky worked its way in when they got him on that visit just prior to Arkansas's. Those were his last two visits, I believe. So, it's been kind of quiet other than I brought information, and it's starting to kind of mesh up a little bit. Even the source who thought Arkansas was out of it, I just kind of tied some of that together. So to say all that, I also heard in this earlier, I guess, whatever it was, the same person that called me talking about that date was saying, hey, has this been kind of a clown show of a recruitment? Sort of like, I don't remember who he said they compared it to, somebody else's recruitment that was kind of like a drama filled. This hasn't been anything like that. This has been a close to the vest just because it's taking longer. I mean, Koa Pete just committed to Arizona in the last few days. That was the other top-rated 5-star that was still out there. So it's not unprecedented. And the other thing is, this isn't about getting attention or making a social media play or any drama like that. The young man is solid. Just watching him today, it's everything I've talked to you about. They even made the Michael Porter Jr. comparison during the McDonald's telecast today. Well, I've never heard that. I was the first one that I know to ever make that comparison, the one I keep talking about. But one of the things I've told you all is he's got all the soft skills at 6'9" as a combo forward. Think of a 3-4 combo, a jumbo wing. He's gonna factor mostly as a wing at the NBA level. But as he gets stronger, he can be some small ball 4 for you. And because of his length and height, he won't even have to be at his strongest as a freshman. Let's say it's Arkansas, to be like a second wing or a fourth. Your wing that's kind of your 3-4 small ball 4. When I watched him today, it's what I always talk about. You see all the soft skills. He can shoot from 3. He can play above the rim. He's got a nice mid-range game. But if you watch the scrimmage today, Every time he tried to drive, when he got to that free throw line extended, he kind of got pushed out of there. He wasn't able to will his way in. And that's what I've noticed about him and have mentioned. He's got to get stronger because the closer he tries to get into the paint and the rim, he's not able to get to all the angles he wants to. He kind of needs a clean lane. That's okay, man. This is the kind of guy that can immediately impact your team. I don't care who it is, even though he's a skinny true freshman, because of all the skill, and it's not just his ability to shoot. Uh, yeah, yeah. I'm not sure what the conversation is here. Something got changed over a year ago. I guess I'm missing. All right. So as far as Nate Ament goes, we'll just sew it up like this now that we're about 11 minutes in. Keep an eye on it. I think Arkansas, based on what Biancardi said, based on the NIL offer that I heard and mentioned, not in specifics, but just a combination of things, and even my source that thought Arkansas was out, combined with other things that he wasn't sure about, makes me feel a little bit better about potentially Arkansas being just right there still. And we'll see. But this has not been a clown show recruitment. I'll repeat that as we move on from Nate Ament. But man, would that be huge if Arkansas were to get him, because it's already the third ranked class according to ESPN. And yeah, now you would add a third McDonald's All American, the highest rated player on your board, because Acuff is fifth. Malik Thomas is in the top 10, anywhere from 7th to 10th, and two or three of the services. And Ament, again, on three, having third, and a few other ones having fourth. The highest rated guy, and you'd have three top 10 ranked 5-stars in this class. Arkansas would arguably have the number one high school class. And don't forget Isaiah Seeley, a top 75-ish 4-star out of Springdale, Arkansas. And this would continue to add to your guard wing recruit signing out of high school. What you did in your first class with Boogie Fland and Carter Knox and Billy Richmond the third. Those were your three high school players that you had in this first class. And you've done it, with Acuff, Malik Thomas, and Seeley. And if you add Ament, it's a big win. You could argue that, he fits a little bit as a small ball 4, so you can make the stretch. But he's not a banger. He's not an interior player. He's not a center. He's not a power forward. I would even go as far as to call him a stretch 4. Again, I use that 3-4 combo, and that's what I've always said about him. So a big wing that you could see on the court with other wings. So if you're sitting there asking yourself, how would that impact guys you're trying to keep in retention, which we're about to jump to here when we talk about Big Z's jumping in the portal? How would that impact it? I don't think it would, because I think you could play Ament on the court again as a small ball 4 with certain lineups and have a guy like Carter Knox or Billy Richmond out there, or some other guys in the portal that Arkansas is looking at, which also is going to be shaped by guys you're trying to keep. This is getting to be very interesting. As we move on now, let's get to Big Z. Zvonimir Visic, the 7-2 center, had some really big moments and big games for Arkansas this year. There was a stretch where, Jonas Adu was not really helping Arkansas. Playing through that foot injury, you could see he wasn't moving well. He missed some games. He was unable to go for long stretches in games. And there were points even in SEC play where Big Z showed up big. But the last third of the season, you really saw his impact start to wane. And you saw guys like Jonas Adu and Trevor in Brazil playing better. Adu Thero out of the lineup because of injury. The other two, so those two veteran frontline guys really stepped up, and you saw less and less of Big Z. By the time you got to the NCAA tournament, he was almost unplayable. Aside from a few moments, really overall, he was just getting abused in the paint at both ends of the floor. Lack of physicality, lack of rebounding. And I always thought this, and I haven't said this, but anyway, Z, the portal today was announced, I think, first reported by Giavoni of ESPN, NBA Draft Express, put this out. A bunch of other Field of 60 and a bunch of others jumped on that. And so it was multiple reports. I had an article I put out within a few minutes that Big Z's going into the portal. Of the 5 guys, I thought Arkansas, there would be, what I always said was I would look for a way to retain all 5. Big Z was kind of at the back end of that, but I went through my reasons why it wouldn't be a bad idea. But I always said that that's only if you don't have plans for something else out of the portal that as a coaching staff, you see as an improvement. And this telegraphs to me immediately that Arkansas's got something else in the works. This isn't about losing a guy. This is about, and it was a lot like how Eric Patrick Melsman did it. There were never any coincidences. There were no guys getting in the portal and transferring that he wasn't pushing out. Period. With plans for those roster spots. This is the same thing here. I'm telling you, it is. So Big Z to the portal, and it says a lot. It says a lot about the retention plans of this coaching staff, and it talks about it. It informs you. Well, then what in the portal do they think they have lined up, or they think they're going to get? So we're going to get into a little bit of that. But Big Z, when I really started thinking about it, and after hearing this news, it was something I always thought and never came out and said. What's going on here? Inside Arkansas frat bots or boys. I'm not sure what all that's about. Something about gets mad when I timestamp something. Well, I mean, I don't know what that. I'm not sure what that's referring to, but okay. Some of the comments are interesting. But getting back to Z, and I've thought about this before, and this may seem unfair, but there were times where I did not think he was as a serious player as the other 8 guys in terms of what the mission was and what's required and what it takes to plug in and be the best you can be. There were times I felt like he wasn't as serious a basketball player. Now, I might be wrong about that, but that was the impression I got. Not by a look on his face, not by any of his body language or anything like that, but just the fact that he seemed to be a little more lackadaisical about things and the way he approached things. I thought there were a lot of missed opportunities in space and moments and things where he just seemed a little bit disconnected at times. And part of that's your maturation process. Remember, this is a guy that played only 15 games as a freshman. You would think by the end of the season, and he did get better at times in certain ways. There was great slippage by the time you got in the final third of your season. You just really saw him being sort of a. I never realized that I could press the screen and I always have the comments fade. Apparently I can get them on here and keep them on here. I did not know that. I just learned that today because I was trying to read something that was on here. So anyway, yeah, the point is that I think the concern I had about him maybe not, mentally being locked in as much as is required, what the assignment was. That was something that always bugged me as we came down the stretch of the season. It was one of the reasons I was glad to see that other guys had stepped up, because I thought that would be a problem for this team trying to close the season on the right way. Now, look, this guy had a big impact in a lot of games that Arkansas had success in. He was a part of this team doing what it did. There's no doubt about that. But in a sense, I really thought he was the guy in the offseason, if he did stay, needed a lot of work, not just getting stronger. He needs to get the grip for his hands, get his hands stronger, whatever the procedure is, do that, lower body, upper body. But I think he needs to take his craft and what it takes to be successful to another level and really work on that. So I thought it was going to require a lot of work. Now, we're over that now. I won't go through his stats, 8.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, 36% or so from three on good volume, averaged nearly 2 blocks per game. That led Arkansas, one of the leaders in the SEC. Okay, I did go through the stats. A guy that, quite honestly, if offensively, the ceiling is pretty damn good. He's a good passer. He can shoot from 3. But the other stuff that's just required for him to have the kind of impact, not just statistically, but to help you win games, that was so much missing late in the year. And Arkansas had better options. And this informs me Arkansas has better options that it sees in the portal. And I think that's a key. Now let's talk a little bit more about retention. A guy like Adu Thero. I mentioned yesterday on my Pig Trail Nation segment, let's see, that we taped those in the afternoon because I talked to an NBA scout on Saturday, and during my Pig Trail Nation segment, I shared some of that information with the scouts. I'd also tweeted this out on Sunday, but he told me that he saw Adu Thero as a 40 to 60 range. So the end of the early part of the second round through the end of the draft. He's had a lot of different mocks as you look over time, anywhere from late first round to early mid second round. And some of that stuff there may be some slippage there, but the scout said, look, this is a guy that would probably get drafted. Some team's going to look at that athleticism, that body. So I'm giving a little bit more information than I gave on Twitter, or even on the Pig Trail Nation yesterday. And he said he's a guy that someone's going to take a chance on, probably because of the physical attributes, the athleticism, and the fact that he just plays, so hard. But the lack of shooting, the lack of skill, the lack of, sort of that feel for the game, which you see translate. I mean, he's not a guy that can gear down. There's not any nuance in how he gets things done, and then the shooting from three, from the free throw line, those are problems. There's good things too. He generates a lot of free throw attempts. He is a physical matchup positive, even potentially at the NBA level, 6'7", 6'8", big, strong, athletic, and fearless. He's fearless. So there's some good things there as well. Either way, it looks to me, and it seems to me, based on things I'm getting, is that Arkansas is really, really getting an even more significant bump than I even was told a few days ago, to make sure that this roster can deliver and has the chance to deliver a national title as soon as next season. And if that's true, that means guys like Adu Thera, who might be facing a mid to late second round draft grade, that's not to say he can't get a guaranteed first contract with a couple of guaranteed years, with a couple of $1 million or whatever. But if he can make that or more in one season at Arkansas and work on his game another year, because athletically and some of these other things, that's all there. What can he add to it to put himself in the same position again this time next year, as a mid to late second round guy, or better, but get more money now? So the more and more I hear, non-specifically about him in terms of a large number, but just guys they're trying to retain in general, I could see if Arkansas stepping that up and saying, look, we can give you better than you might get in a guarantee. And so how long do you play that process out? Do you let him go to the combine if he's invited? Do you wait through all that? You got to recruit. I mean, Arkansas's got two 6'7" big wings on coming out of the portal that are going to Zoom with him on Tuesday, two different ones. I've been tweeting about one. I interviewed him. I did a story on him. About that, Keyshawn Hall. The other one is Abdi Bashir Jr. out of Monmouth, a 20-point per game scorer, 38% from three, almost 80 and 86, almost 87% from the free throw line. But that 38.3% from three, he took 332 threes this year. He actually shot a percentage better from distance. That's huge volume, and a percentage better from distance than he did overall from the field. So this is a guy that, and he's not a big rebounder at 6'7", 2.6 rebounds, 2.2 assists. No, you buy tickets for this guy because of the scoring ability and the ability to stretch the floor and change the game a little bit. Another one of those bigger, jumbo wing types. Keyshawn Hall, we've gone through his stats. But both of those guys are set to Zoom with Arkansas on Tuesday. We've talked a lot about Lamar Wilkerson, who told me he wasn't going to start taking visits until after the Final Four. Well, he's started doing Zooms. He started doing Zooms. I think he's had a couple of those at least. I think Auburn and Kansas. He had a visit from the Ole Miss coaching staff already, and he may be taking an unofficial visit in the middle of the week somewhere. I think maybe SMU now. He's down in Texas right now, and so that may be just an easy get to, and it's an unofficial visit. So that's even before the end of the Final Four. This stuff moves fast. It's why when I talked to Lamar, I pinned him down. Could you rechange your calculations on wait until after the Final Four? Because you got a lot of teams that are already out now. And this, that they're prioritizing a lot of guys, not just one. All teams have to cast a wider net than how many guys they're going to take, because they're not going to get every single just individual that they contact or maybe have at the highest on their big board. So they got to have several guys at the same position. So if you wait around, you might miss out. So it's not surprising me at all that Lamar Wilkerson is kind of getting the ball rolling. Ashdown kid. So when I look at the backcourt and wings, you're talking about, as we continue to talk about Arkansas's presence with guys like Lamar Wilkerson, who I said is could be the leader in the clubhouse there, based on what a source told me. Keyshawn Hall, we know Arkansas's got serious interest there. Been talking about that before the portal even opened. Now we're talking about Bashir. Anytime it gets to a Zoom call with your staff, that's serious. So that's anywhere from your 2 through 3 and small ball 3-4. When you start looking at all three of those names for wing and arguably mostly backcourt kind of guys, and not really big bodies. And you're losing Jonas Adu. Now he's in the portal, and you had a thin front line to begin with, and not a lot of physicality. So that tells me that even though we've talked so much about Wilkerson and Hall and now this Bashir, there are names that we've talked some about a few, but we know now for a fact that Arkansas is in deep with at least one true frontline type of guy, probably two. And I'm going to go through the guys that I think are probably at the top of the board. One of the names I didn't mention was Rataj. I haven't brought his name up in any of these. Out of Oregon State. Committed to Baylor today. You know why I didn't bring his name up? Why I haven't talked about it on HogvilleNET? Because I was told not to spend any time on that. Wasn't in Arkansas's plans. And I've heard that there's other talk out there, and I saw it on the message board at HogvilleNET. Some folks thought maybe it was. I don't know where that circulated or where that is out there, other than I saw some people asking about it. But I was told not to look that way a while back. So in none of these segments have I talked about him. Well, he's off to Baylor. So you can scratch that one if you did have that in your wheelhouse or on your bingo card. I never did. That's why I haven't brought his name up. I'm only doing it now to say he's off to Baylor, and there was a reason for that. And now we see Big Z in the portal. The name that I tweeted about today, because I believe it was Joe Tipton's, had Arkansas on the list of contacts for Morez Johnson, the former 5-star, the 6'9", 230, 250. I don't know how big he is. Athletic, strong. But he played at Illinois his freshman season this past year. And when you look at him statistically, you always have to think about how many minutes did he get? What was the role? And we saw him against Arkansas. He was effective when Arkansas lost that Turkey Day game in Kansas City. Had 3 double-doubles this year, but Morez Johnson, 6'9", again, just a beef stack, 250-plus pounds probably. And again, he's athletic, but 6.7 points, 7 on 60+% shooting from the field. So he gets it done around the basket. 7 rebounds per game, 1.1 block. He only played 17.7 minutes, so not even 18 minutes. So when you look at that production, it's easy to see if this guy in year 2, wherever he ends up, carves out a 24 to 28 minute role, somewhere in that range, if not more, how those numbers go up, and he starts to look like a potential double-double and a guy that's giving you 2.5 blocks per game. You got to think about it in those terms. It's always relative when you look at a guy statistically to the playing time and what he's getting there. So I throw that in there to say, this is to me, a guy that, if I'm Arkansas, this is one of the guys that's at the top of my board for the front line. He's right up there. If he's not 1, he's 2. He's in that, to me, he's that kind of guy. And we'll see what happens. But he has shown enough where I think he could be a force. Arkansas, if we think about what we said even before the season ever began, some of the problems, not enough frontline pieces. The 9 overall, not enough. Need to get to 11. I keep talking about Arkansas's headed that way. They're going to expand to at least 11. At least. And if something comes up under that, it's because they decided to put a lot of NIL money on certain things, and maybe they stop at 10. But I believe they're going to get to 11. I just do. But this is the kind of guy that brings something Arkansas didn't have last year in this past season, and we identified in the preseason. It's beef on the front line. Arkansas just didn't have a physical presence. You saw it all season long, the lack of being able to carve out space and play with a constant pounding inside at both ends. Arkansas just didn't even have it. Even when Jonas Adu got healthy, he's not really a full-on physical kind of guy. He was Arkansas's best physical player inside, other than Adu Thero, but Thero really wasn't an interior force. He's just not that guy. He's playing wing in on a slash, getting out transition. He does bully ball his way, but he's not a guy that's pitching a tent and setting up camp in the paint. Arkansas needs a guy that's a bowling ball in there, can move people around, carve out space, and get on that glass. Be it not only be a strong rebounder, but impact how comfortable the other players are at both ends trying to deal with a guy like that. That's what Kamani Johnson would do. Not as talented as this guy, but remember, Kamani Johnson was usually anywhere from 8 to 9 to 10 in a rotation. We know EPM didn't like to go but beyond 7 or 8, but he would. And a lot of times it was Kamani Johnson just because Arkansas was too soft at times. He'd put him in as a wrecking ball, and it would change the tone of games. Imagine a guy that's a little bigger, a little more talented, more athletic, and that can give you more minutes consistently and be in the fold. That's what I see when I look at him more as Johnson. So keep an eye on that. I couldn't wait to see his name officially in the portal. That just happened not that long ago. But then to see Arkansas as one of the initial contacts, I think that's big news. And so we already know Arkansas has been in the mix for Nick Pringle, another physical big man that's an SEC journeyman. There's nothing wrong with a Nick Pringle at 6'10", another strong guy that can play around the basket, impact the paint at both ends. We know he had a big game against Arkansas, and the Hogs lost to South Carolina and Columbia in March. So you look at guys like that. Where is Arkansas going here? Another guy who just was announced this afternoon, I think it was tipped in again, Yaxel Lindeborg. I watched him. I've seen him play this year, but not consistently, like long stretches of games, just highlights and segments, flipping around the channel and around, when I wasn't covering an Arkansas game. But I watched him throughout Alabama Birmingham's championship game in the American Athletic Conference tournament championship game against Memphis. And this dude is a monster. 6'9", 240. When you look at him statistically, he's a guy that you can play through because he's such a great decision maker and can impact the game in so many ways. I like to always talk about Jalen Williams when I talk about the cerebral part of the game. Remember, Jalen could pass. He developed a little bit of a three-point shot. He got better and better there. Became a double-double machine. Good around the basket, good at getting putbacks, good at taking charges, good at being at the right place at the right time, good at diving on the floor. Yaxel Lindenborg is not exactly the same kind of guy in terms of positionally, but he would be a power four, stretch four, could help you at the 5, but at 6'9", 240, 17.7 points per game, 11.4 rebounds, 4.2 assists for UAB. He can pick and choose and set up teammates. 1.8 blocks, 1.7 steals per game, 52.2% from the field, 35.7% from three, and over 75% from the foul line. What more do you want from a 6'9", 240 guy? Now, he's put his name in the NBA draft, but when I watched him against Memphis, and then remembering, because I watched that full game, but then remembering some other things I'd seen from him, he's the kind of guy that could come in and immediately make Arkansas better and make that front line better immediately. So those are just some names, when we start talking frontline pieces, when we move forward, because now I think that becomes, I wouldn't be surprised if the first commitment that we hear of would be a frontline guy. That would not surprise me at all. So I guess I had frozen the comments, and now I got them working, and I've never messed with that. So I'm sorry about the delays here. I'm not good with the comments. Y'all know that by now. There's nothing fancy about my setup and how I do things. It's all about the content. I do repeat myself. I reinforce things because I don't want too many times I see on social media something being misportrayed, not quite. So I sometimes go back and repeat it so that it sinks in. I apologize for those that get it the first time. So that's part of the method of my madness. But when I look at the front line again with Big Z out, I think it's clear. Now, what about Trevor Brazile? Are you getting him back? I've mentioned on multiple of these, 2 or 3 of them prior to today, that I've heard coming from his camp, more than one, that he'd like to come back to Arkansas. Well, if that's true, that helps some of your front line problems. It doesn't help your physicality. He is playing a more physical brand of basketball. He is playing a tougher brand of basketball and consistently, but he's not a physical guy. He's not a back to the basket or a paint camper. He's a guy that's on the perimeter. He works his way in. He'll come in and he'll fly in for putback dunks or rebounds. He'll shoot some threes. He is not a paint camper. Arkansas needs a physical presence. So but when we're talking retention, Jonas Adu gone, Big Z gone. You're down to now, as far as we know, Trevor Brazile. You're going to get at least two bigs, in my opinion, out of the portal now, minimum. And you hope, maybe if you could get Lindenborg and Lindenborg, however you pronounce that, Linda, not N, Lindeborg. If you can get Yaxel Lindeborg, and let's say a Morris Johnson or some combination of those, one of those guys, and a Nick Pringle. There's going to be other names out there and in the mix. But either way you look at it, I think Arkansas's got to get bigger, beef-wise, and the way that you play, the actual way that you use it and understand it. Arkansas's got to go there. And I think I wouldn't be surprised again if we hear that Arkansas adds one or two of those kind of guys. But certainly I think they're going to get at least two more frontline players, even if you can't get Adu Thero back. So now the question becomes, well, Brazile didn't play his best basketball until Thero was out. And if you think about it, they were kind of, Thero's getting all those minutes, and Brazile's kind of that four with another big on the floor, same as Thero starting games with another big on the floor. It was usually Big Z, later Jonas Adu. So does it make sense if you get both of those guys back? I say it does. I think that's not to say that the players will feel that way and that you're going to get to keep both. But I think that it makes sense in terms of how you would use them, could use them, and how they could complement each other. Because you can still run Brazile plenty at your 5 spot with versatility 1 through 4 when he's on the court that way. And then you can switch those guys out as needed. Does it matter at this point that Brazile starts every game? I don't know for him if it does or not. Thero's a guy to me that's kind of been promised that role. He started every game while he was available until he came back, and they kind of rushed him. Let's not say they rushed him back, but whatever. He played 5 minutes, and it wasn't his best 5 minutes of the season. He played off the bench, but everybody understood that. He was kind of a last-minute addition for that Sweet 16 game against Texas Tech. So I think there's a way to you can justify keeping those guys and still add 2 more frontline pieces out of the portal. I think you got to do it. I went through the names that I really like right now. There are others out there, but I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on a bunch of names on the front line right now. Again, sometimes I have reasons for that. And I had the Rataj guy. I had a reason for never bringing his name up because I was told, nope. So there it is. All right. So one of the things I want to get into now as we continue to talk about retention, we went through some of that. Brazile, Thero. What about Carter Knox and Billy Richmond? Knox is a guy, when I look at him, and you start, again, going back to wing talk, and you're going, but wait a minute, Lamar Wilkerson. Well, I look at Lamar Wilkerson, and I kind of think of him as the guy that you help come in to offset the loss of a veteran guard in Nelly. As mostly a 2, can play the 3. I see Lamar that way, but a better 3-point shooter. You're helping answer that. You're looking to improve on things that we identified way back preseason before we saw it play out in the regular season. A sniper and a guy that does it efficiently on high volume, that is a threat and changes how defenses have to consider you. Wilkerson's that kind of guy. But Carter Knox is a guy that's improved and continues to improve everywhere, including 3-point shooting. He ended up 35 of 100 from 35%. He's a guy that's giving you more and more reasons, if you get him back, that he's going to not only start every game like he did this year, but he didn't start every game, excuse me. He started 2/3 of the games, but a guy that you would project going forward if you get him back as a starter for every game. But at the end of the year, he was starting every game. Part of that was the attrition with Boogie going out, but you wanted him in that starting lineup. And that was the point I was trying to make. You wanted him in there every game. And so when you're looking at doing Zooms with big wings like Bashir and Keyshawn Hall, I continue to remind folks, you can pair those guys up with another wing. It doesn't mean, this must mean Carter Knox is gone. Bye-bye. Or Billy Richmond. No, I don't think it does mean that. I do think Carter Knox, when I look at outside of Adu Thero, when I look outside of that possible race to keep him, I see Carter Knox as arguably the next most important piece in retention because he's strong. He has figured out how to get to his spots. He has figured out better shot selection. He has figured out how to score off the ball without dominating the ball. So even guys that are off the ball, once they get it, you can tell they try to sometimes do too much. I don't see that with him. And he understands how to use his frame and size and weight to get downhill and get to the basket. He understands when to take a three. He understands how to move to a spot to get a good shot. All of this stuff started to click. He was getting better and better. Kudos, John Calipari. Kudos, Arkansas coaching staff. You started winning games, and it wasn't one thing or another. It wasn't just the same old guys just carrying you through. Everybody got better. Everybody stepped up. It was a different hero sometimes on any given game, and Carter Knox was one of those guys. And he's now getting to the point where he's racking up free throw attempts. So if he's not finished in getting the basket, he's getting the free throw line. He's checking every box of a guy that sets up for a potential all-league kind of guy in year 2 at Arkansas. And so this to me is a top priority to start, whatever NIL raise you can do for this. This is what you do for a guy like Carter Knox. Billy Richmond III, also a guy that was vastly improved, a really solid defender, an energy guy. Rough edges still. No, all these guys. Carter Knox still got some rough edges. I'd say Billy Richmond has more, but really Billy Richmond also showed a lot of improvement, showed a lot of impact when Arkansas needed it to get down the stretch of the season, start winning games, and get to the NCAA tournament and get to a Sweet 16. Let's not forget, in tandem, Richmond 16 points, Knox 15, the 2 leading scorers on your team, and the biggest win of the season to get to the Sweet 16 over 5th ranked and 2 seed St. John's in Providence. They helped Rick Pitino tap out of this NCAA tournament. When everybody on the East Coast, that was the darling. So you got 2 guys there that I said before, I think you try to retain all 5. All right, Big Z's out. I had the caveat, not if you think you can improve. I don't know how much you're going to improve on a second-year guy that not with what Knox brings and a guy like Billy Richmond. Those are both wants, and I consider them to be needs. Even if you're recruiting other big wings, because again, Keyshawn Hall's a guy that can be your small ball 4. I really don't I see those guys bringing more of that element than even a Carter Knox who can do that. But Carter Knox is a true 3 and could even potentially, as he continues to improve as a shooter, decision maker, and what he does with the basketball, be in a jumbo lineup where he's playing a 2. Billy Richmond, we've seen playing on the ball as a lead, sort of triggering the offense at times. So these guys are versatile enough where you can move pieces around the board, and you don't have to get so sewn up in, well, this guy's 6'6", he's a wing. This guy's 6'7", he's a wing. Think about how you use them. Think about how they can complement each other. Think about how Calipari's always put highly talented guys together. It's not been a problem for him historically. And then he figures out ways to make them work together. And it's not a matter of, well, if this guy's on the court, that means the other guy just can't be out there. So don't lose sight of that when you start looking at these names that Arkansas is recruiting. When we've gone through them, we're going through a lot of them. There's some stuff I can't talk about. There's players that Arkansas is in on. Look, you're seeing coaches going out and doing home visits, and Calipari is a guy that's, I'm not gonna say anything specific on that, but you can bet Arkansas is in full mode, full swing right now. It's not just about the Zooms. It's about where they're going to go, who they're going to go see, and there's some names I can't talk about right now. I've been asked not to, so I'm going to sit on a few little things. But the ones I have talked about, Arkansas would be in great shape landing some of these guys. And it's not to say that Arkansas is not going to lose anybody else to the portal that you wanted to keep. I'm not saying that won't happen. I even said you want to keep all 5. It may end up being only 3. I've said that for a while. Somewhere in that 3 to 5 range, which set my expectation that you'd probably get then somewhere from 2 to 4 out of the portal. Nate Ament is another player to look at. I'm circling back to that to say that's going to impact not just your NIL money, but it impacts your roster numbers. If you're expanding to 11, you still have to count that up. And if you added Nate Ament, that means 4 out of high school. You've already got Kareem Martal at 6'9", sort of a versatile guy. We haven't talked a lot about him. We've talked about him, but not lately as much. So, he's another guy that's, to me, not an interior impact kind of guy. And I've thrown out the idea that maybe he's a back end type, somewhere from 9 to 11 in a rotation that you expand, kind of like we might think about Isaiah Seeley coming out of the high school group. I don't think he's going to be looked at and expected to have the kind of impact role year one. So you're kind of looking around at what's out there. So if you add Ament, that's 4 out of high school. You got Artile, that'd be 5 players. And now, how many of the 4 we've really talked about you're trying to retain? Now maybe it's 5 with a Duke Thero, 5 if you got a Mint. 5 plus 5 is 10. All right. So then who else would you be getting out of the portal? Only one guy, right? If it worked out that way. So I think at the end of the day, Arkansas still ends up with 2 out of 4, which means they're either not going to get Amen, and they're probably going to lose at least one more out of the current guys we've been talking about retaining. The one guy I haven't mentioned in this one talking about retention is DJ Wagner. And I've said all along, DJ, it's just a matter of, does he want to continue to have a 5-star freshman coming in that plays his position where, that guy's going to have a major role, and there's going to be some, on-ball lead guard swapping. You're not going to be doing it full time. You ended up with that full-time job because of what happened with Boogie Fland. And even when Fland came back, Fland was coming off the bench in a reduced role, and he was playing more off the ball with Wagner at the point. Wagner is a guy that is a tough customer. He's got a lot of positive in his slashing game, his little floater game. He's not the most careful guy with the basketball as a lead guard. He will set guys up. He is not as good as facilitator as Boogie Fland was. He's not as good at taking care of the basketball as Boogie Fland was, but he had his own positives. And he played his best basketball when it was just him mainly on the ball. If he comes back, he's got the prospect of a guy like Darius Acuff Jr. now having to share those duties again. What does that look like? How do you do that? What's in the mix? He's another guy that I think you're looking to retain. And if you don't, and he goes in the portal, that tells me that Calipari and the staff understood that the ball's going to be in Acuff's hands a lot, and they can go in another direction to help supplement with a veteran person out of the portal in the backcourt. So there are so many things that are going to impact this as we continue to move through it. And I'm fascinated by it. I'm absolutely fascinated by it because I was so impressed in a short time on the job without a full recruiting cycle what Calipari did when he came to Arkansas. And I think it played out preseason they were 16th ranked in the AP poll, right? And they finished in the Sweet 16. They had a hell of a run at the end of the year. 7 out of 10 wins, seven wins out of their last 10 games. The Hogs did. And what? They went to the Sweet 16. This is the kind of year you wanted it to be better than that. They were good enough to not only make the Elite Eight, they should have. And I don't think there's a team in the field that they couldn't have beaten had they been able to have another game like they did against St. John's, where you didn't have a long implosion stretch at the end. All right. So the reason I brought that up again is to say, I think he's going to knock it out of the park again. There are a lot of question marks. We know that, but it's going to start picking up and moving faster. We're already seeing it. Zoom call set up, Big Z to the portal. We're seeing it. And I'm really focused on frontline beef. I'm keeping an eye on that in terms of what they're going to add. I'm certain of it. And depending upon, how long this takes with Wilkerson, I think they're going to look for someone to step in and not only supplement what Nelly was going to thought to bring from day one as a volume scorer, but be even more of a presence from beyond the 3-point line. But also we're looking at big 3-4 combo type guys on that wing. If you get a Duke Thero back and Carter Knox and Billy Richmond, that may be enough to squeeze out the need for something like that. Whereas you would still need a Nelly replacement in Wilkerson, and you're still going to need beef on that front line. So there's more than one way to look at this and how it could work out and how you could get guys to complement each. But I think this class has even more promise in totality than the one Calipari assembled for the first roster on a team that was good enough to not only get to an Elite Eight, but I think that team could have beaten anybody that's left in this field now in the Final Four, playing the way it was, just subtracting out the long implosion stretch, which seems like, okay, you're saying that again, but the team continued to do that so much that you couldn't really believe they would be able to do that. Well, again, maybe that's true, But that's also maybe why when we pay attention to what they do here in the portal, we're seeing them by some of these names addressing physicality, some of these names addressing 3-point shooting. Maybe they address guys that they see as a little bit more cerebral and able to play chess at the end of games. Maybe there's some of that in what we'll find out later and what they end up with to help fix those issues. Because they didn't fix it. They didn't fix it. They got a little better at times. They were resilient enough to overcome it in some games that they won. Well, they had to, or they wouldn't have been in the NCAA tournament if the same problem had the same result every time. But it had enough of a bad result, including the last game here, that maybe they address that as well in this portal. Keep an eye on that. I always go long. It's 51 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm going to recap by saying I think the news on Nate Ament pushing out his decision and other things that as I piece it together sounds a little more positive than I was feeling about it in the last couple of weeks or so about where that could go. Always remember this has been a serious recruitment. It is a recruitment that's important to John Calipari, and we'll see where it lands. So I leave you with that on Nate Ament. Let's see, how long his time frame is now to make a choice. The spring signing period's about to start here soon. Big Z to the portal. It telegraphs a lot. It telegraphs this coaching staff's retention plans, and it also telegraphs what they're going to be doing in the portal. We now know, because we already knew there was going to be some Frontline because of Jonas Adu. I think now this makes it clear they're looking to add 2 more to the Frontline and keep Trevor Brazile and potentially find a way to keep Adu Thero. I think that's all clear. And if you go 11 deep and you want to call Kareem Artal part of that answer, okay, I can go there with you. Maybe so. But he's not a beefy inside guy. Neither is Adu Thero, neither is Trevor Brazile. So kind of to recap the Z to the portal, I think it amplified the retention part and then what you're doing in the portal in terms of that front line for John Calipari. Some of the wing guys that we talked about that Arkansas's got Zooms with, think of them as big wings and as versatile pieces that you could play with alongside guys like Carter Knox and Billy Richmond III, because you're trying to keep them as well. And that was Keyshawn Hall and Abdi Bashir out of Monmouth. Keyshawn Hall out of Central Florida. They're both doing Zooms with Arkansas, scheduled to do it on Tuesday. If you haven't read my article on Keyshawn Hall, I interviewed him. That's over on HogvilleNET as well as Pig Trail Nation's website. And you can go check some of that out. And then we keep our eyes again on Lamar Wilkerson. There's some other names. I'm going to say it one more time. There's some other names that have gotten back to me and I'm sitting on for now, but it helps paint the picture and some of the talking points we've gone through today. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. Please hit subscribe, like, and share. Until next time, and we're going to jump back in 15 minutes. If I've missed something that's broken since I've been on, if that happens, we're going to do it. But until then, thank you for being here and see you soon.